Hi everyone. Oh, I'm not in this frame here. There we go. Hi everyone. So this is the video for the pre-reading for "We Came All the Way from Cuba so you could dress like this." So again, the idea here is we're going to go through, like we've done with some of the other stories, take you through some of the first things that are going on in the story to help you understand how to think about some of the things that are going to be coming up. A lot of good information is put there in the beginning, and sometimes we don't pick up on it, right? And so make sure that you're aware of what you're picking up on at the beginning. So to start off, let's just look at the title. We came all the way from Cuba so you could dress like this. And one of the things we talked about in class, of course, is the idea of conflict and how that conflict develops early, right? If we looked at the Saving Sardi video, you can see saving Sardi. We had to save Sardi from something, so there's a conflict, right? There's something after Sardi, and the character is going to save her from it. So there's obviously a conflict that we're going to have there, and we can look at the title here, and we can say that there is going to be a conflict, right? We came all the way from Cuba so you could dress like this. So who's this we? So who's going to be speaking? It seems like it would be her parents, right? Her parents are the ones who might have brought her all the way from Cuba, and they're the ones who are going to be upset with the kind of clothes she's going to be wearing now that she gets here. Not an uncommon kind of conflict for parents to have with kids about the things that they're going to be wearing. We might especially see some of this heightened with the children of immigrants because the children are going to be assimilating. They're going to be adapting to the new culture, and so they're going to feel like they need to kind of fit in, and that's not going to be what the parents expect. And so, right here from the title, you see this conflict with the parents, and so we should expect that as we go through, there is a conflict with the parents. It's going to be that's going to be happening here as the story goes through. And again, a conflict that seems like it's going to stem from the recent immigration that we have in the family. So again, the title there gives a lot there. It says Fernena. Fernena it's what that is simply like a dedication that we have to somebody. Like she wrote this. I don't know who Nena is, but it's a friend or a family member or something like that, who she thinks. Hold on, sorry, my cat was freaking out and doing something, and I had to stop her. But the uh, uh, the idea here, sorry, it made me lose my train of thought. Oh, so for Nana, so it's just simply something that we're dedicating to somebody, right? And so you don't need to know who that is. It's kind of like a personal thing in there that's not. We don't need to worry about. The first letter got kind of cut off here. It should be I. I'm wearing. So let's start off with reading this first paragraph. I'm wearing a green sweater. It's made of some synthetic material and it's mine. I've been wearing it for 2 days straight and I have no plans to take it off right now. Okay. Um, One of the first things to notice in here is that this is in the present tense. I am wearing a green sweater now. We usually don't do that very often, right? Talk about in the present tense, and that's something this story is going to play with. It's one of the things that's going to make this story potentially confusing to us, is that the time is going to shift up, and by the time we get to the end of this video, you'll see a place where the time does something rather strange, and that's something that we want to be able to think about. So I'm wearing this green sweater now. It's made of synthetic material. It's mine. Been wearing it for 2 days. Why has she been wearing it for 2 days straight? It is mine. And to my mind, one of the things we could potentially see in here, there's something about this sweater that matters, right? If we're going to be bringing up this sweater in this way, talking about this connection, it's probably going to matter later on, and it's probably fill in the blank, a symbol, right? This sweater becomes a symbol, and it's probably going to come up later on. Anything that we bring up that's just an object that seems pretty basic and that we talk about for a good deal of time is going to be a symbol. And so that's why we knew that when looking at the flowers, that the flowers were going to be a symbol. They're just flowers. It doesn't make any sense to say that, why are we just going to have a story about flowers? Flowers don't do anything. Well, if the flowers are symbols, then something like that becomes important. All right, then we get here to hold on. The joys of recording from home. Again, my cat was freaking out, tearing up some furniture, wanted to go outside in the snow, driving me crazy. So let's go on to this next paragraph. She says here, I'm 10 years old. So there we have an age here that would have actually directly said it. Oftentimes we don't say that. And I think one of the things about that is because this is, as you'll see, she's really talking from the future, right? It may seem like she's in the present, as we said before, but she's really talking from the future, and so she kind of gives this time frame, and we'll see how we know that she's talking from the future. I'm 10 years old. I just got off the boat, or rather the ship. The actual boat didn't make it. We got picked up halfway from Havana to Miami by a gigantic oil freighter to which they then tied our boat. That's how our boat got smashed to smithereens, its wooden planks breaking off like toothpicks against the ship's metal hull. Everybody talks about American ingenuity, so I'm not sure why somebody didn't anticipate that would happen, but they didn't. So the boat that brought me and my parents most of the way from Cuba is now just part of the debris that will wash up on tourist beaches all over the Caribbean. So we can see that she's come from by boat from Cuba. That was definitely a somewhat it's something that happened a lot for a while. I grew up in Miami, and that was a common kind of a thing. You would have people coming from Cuba landing on boats. It's not very far. Miami is farther, but if we from Cuba to Key West, which is the farthest southest most southern point of Florida, most southern point in the continental United States, it's only 90 miles from Key West to Cuba. So it's not too difficult to get from one to the other. So they just got off the 10 years old. They've gotten off the boat, uh, um, coming to the United States. Their boat is going to be is going to be smashed, and so we just have a sense of them getting here. We get a sense of they came from Cuba. This is how they got here. Um, as I speak, my parents are being interrogated by an official from the Office of Immigration and Naturalization Services. It's all a formality because this is 1963, and no Cuban claiming political asylum actually gets turned away. We're evidence that the revolution has failed the middle class and that communism is bad. My parents, my father's an accountant and my mother's a social worker, are living, breathing examples of the suffering Cubans have endured under the tyranny of Fidel Castro. And so, for a while, then under U.S. law, Cubans were just allowed to come in. They were automatically granted political asylum, which is why you had so many Cubans coming in for a while. Some of those rules have changed, but that used to be the case. And so again, she's just setting up the time period for it here. And so in some ways, this is fairly simple and straightforward. We know it's 1963. We know that they are going to be political refugees from Cuba, and we know that as she is telling this story, right? I'm wearing my green sweater as I speak. As she's telling this, her parents are being interrogated by an official from the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Services. Again, all that seems fairly straightforward. Going on, the immigration officer, kind of at the top of the page here, the immigration officer, a fat Hungarian lady with sparkly hazel eyes and a perpetual smile, asked my parents why they came over, and my father, whose face is bright red from spending 2 days floating in a little boat on the Atlantic Ocean, while secretly terrified, points to me. I'm sitting on a couch across the room, more bored than exhausted, and says, we came for her so she could have a future, right? And you can see this relating, of course, back to our title. We came all the way from Cuba so you could dress like this. And they're saying, sorry, I think that went uh, blurry. But the idea that they came for their daughter, right? That's what the father's going to be declaring that they came for her to give her a future, and so you can already see this conflict developing. They said we came here for you, and then you can see from that title that she's not doing things that they want her to do, and that becomes part of that conflict that we want to potentially be dealing with here. And so just keep that in mind. So again, this whole first part is taking place in the Immigration Nationalization Services office in Miami. They've just gotten off the boat, and they're going to be and they're going to be being processed for that, right? And the father is talking about that's why they came, right? They endured this for her, okay? And so just keep in mind that that's what he says here. And then as we go through, sorry, I got blurry again. Um, down here at the bottom says the immigration officer speaks halting Spanish, and with it she tells my parents about fleeing the communists in Hungary. She says they took everything from her family, including a large country estate with 44 acres and two lakes, and that's now being used as a vocational training center. Can you imagine that? She says. There's an official presidential portrait of John F. Kennedy behind her, which will need to be replaced in a week or so. So she's saying she came from Hungary, which is a country in Europe, which is going to be part of the Soviet bloc, part of the uh, um, communist Russia that we have, and so it says that she's sympathetic to what's going on with them because they're coming from communist Cuba. Um, so all that makes some sense. This last sentence, though, is really important here. There's an official presidential portrait of John F. Kennedy behind her. He was the president in 1963, which will need to be replaced in a week or so. Some of you might know why it needs to be replaced. If we were in class, I'd ask. Maybe one of you would tell me. And some of you are thinking, oh, I know right now. It'll need to be replaced because he's going to be assassinated. That is an interesting thing that we have here because notice that we began from the beginning saying, I'm wearing this green sweater, right? Here I am sitting in the Immigration Naturalization Services office wearing this green sweater. Here's what I am doing at this point, right? Like she's living in that moment. But then here she is going to say that the portrait needs to be replaced in a week or so. Well, that means she can see into the future, right? Because nobody knew that this was actually going to happen, right? Nobody, it's not like she, how did she know that the president was going to be assassinated? And so this story exists in this weird place. That's why I said pay attention to the idea that it's in present tense. You might have thought, well, whatever, it's in present tense. But if we look at this line, we can realize that our character is not stuck in a particular time in this way, even though it's told in the present tense. So that becomes really important to keep in mind because if you move through the rest of the story, you're going to become confused if when we start bouncing around in certain kinds of ways because you're like, how can she see this? How does she know all this? And realize that this story is kind of told backwards. Um, it's told from the future, and so we can see into the future, even though it's told in the present tense, right? So that makes sense. Usually, if we're telling from the future, we would say, I remember when I was 10 years old. We go, okay, got it, right? But she says, I am 10 years old, and then tells us, oh, by the way, I'm actually talking from the future because I can see the future, and she's giving us this clue. That's what this is here. Why this is here? Because otherwise we wouldn't be able to understand how to read the story. Um, and then she goes, I fold my arms. Sorry, I don't know why it keeps getting blurry like that. I fold my arms in front of my chest and across the green sweater. Tonight, the U.S. government will put us up in a noisy transient hotel. We'll be allowed to stay there at taxpayer expense for a couple of days until my godfather, who lives with his mistress somewhere in Miami, comes to get us. Right. And so keep that in mind. Again, we're kind of, this idea of seeing the future in mind as we go through. And so we understand this sense of where we're going to go next. I'm going to skip over later on to this page over here. They're in the INS Center and all that. But then she says, I'm still clutching the doll. She gets a doll at the INS Center. A thing I'll never play with, but which I'll carry with me all my life. She knows in the future she's going to carry all of her life. From apartment to apartment, one move after another. Eventually, her little blonde nylon hairs will fall off, and 30 years later, after I'm diagnosed with cancer, she'll sit atop my dresser, scarred and bald, like a chemo patient. We get see, and I wanted to point that out because you're going to be confused about 30 years later. But the idea is that this is really told from somewhere in the future. It just is speaking as if it's in the present, right? Makes sense? So she can know those things about her, what's going to happen in the future, even though we talk about it in the present tense, and we can talk about it as we go through. So I'm about out of time with this. Hopefully, I'll give you enough to be able to understand what's going on.